Carlos walked into the elegant restaurant, one of those places where every detail whispers luxury, from the soft glow of the chandeliers to the delicate clinking of glassware. He felt a mix of excitement and pride, holding his new girlfriend's hand as they were led to their table. But the moment he sat down, his eyes locked onto a familiar figure moving gracefully between the tables. It was Isadora, his ex-wife. The shock hit him like a wave, stirring memories he thought were carefully buried. Isadora drew attention, not because of her beauty, but because of the quiet strength that radiated from her. Wearing a waitress uniform, there was something unspoken in her gaze. Pregnant and determined, she balanced trays and smiles with a lightness that revealed her resilience. Carlos could feel the tension in the air, a silent story unfolding beneath the noise of dishes and the murmur of conversation. It was a moment where past and present collided, and nothing felt quite the same. That unexpected encounter made Carlos reflect on how their lives had taken such different paths. There, among polished silverware and soft music, he no longer saw the woman he once knew, but someone quietly fighting her own battles with courage. It was a reminder that life rarely follows the script we imagine, and that sometimes the hardest moments come dressed as surprises. But this was only the first page of a story far more complex than a simple dinner could reveal. Carlos lived at the peak of success, or at least, that's how he saw it. Surrounded by million-dollar contracts, designer suits, and a model girlfriend on his arm, he walked with the kind of confidence that left no room for doubt. He believed he had won at life after the divorce. The luxury cars, the exclusive parties, the constant spotlight, all reinforced the idea that he was untouchable, a man who had risen above the chaos of his past. But deep down, there was a fragility he refused to acknowledge. He had convinced himself that material success meant true victory. The flawless suits and expensive dinners were trophies of his achievements, proof that he was living the dream. But seeing Isadora that night stirred something different, a silent question he had never dared to face. Maybe, in his pursuit of status and comfort, he had left behind what truly mattered. The woman he once loved, standing there vulnerable yet strong, forced him to confront the emptiness behind the sparkle. That moment cracked the facade Carlos had built around himself. It wasn't just about losing Isadora, it was about losing touch with his own humanity. Sometimes, the true victories in life aren't measured in dollars or awards, but in the depth of our connections and the understanding we cultivate. And just as he began to realize this, the surprises of that night were far from over. When Carlos's eyes finally landed on Isadora's belly, something inside him crumbled. She was 7 months pregnant, and the sight hit him like a punch to the gut. He tried to hide his reaction, to keep his composure in front of his new girlfriend, but the impact was impossible to contain. For months, he believed the past was settled, buried. But now, standing before him, was living proof that time doesn't stop just because we choose to move on. Isadora's pregnancy flipped a switch Carlos didn't know existed. It was as if everything he believed about his new life was suddenly in question. Could that child be mine? He wondered, and the mere possibility left him breathless. It wasn't just about the baby. It was about everything he had ignored or lost in chasing the shiny, superficial path. That baby's presence made Isadora feel even further removed from the world he now inhabited, a world built on appearances. More than surprise, what Carlos felt was discomfort. For the first time, what stood before him couldn't be bought, ignored, or manipulated. The pregnancy revealed a new Isadora, not just a strong woman, but a mother preparing to face the world on her own. And in that silent instant between restaurant tables, Carlos realized there was far more to this story than he was ready to face. Isadora's legs trembled, as if her own body was fighting against the avalanche of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. But she couldn't give in. In front of Carlos, his new girlfriend, and the surrounding guests, she had to maintain her composure. Her uniform felt like armor, and the tablet in her hands became more than just a tool for taking orders. It was a shield, small but enough to hide her sweaty palms and racing heart. Being strong, in that moment, was her only option. She took deep breaths between tables, anchoring herself in routine, jotting down orders, offering polite smiles, keeping her voice steady. Her pride wouldn't allow her to show any weakness, not out of vanity, but survival. To reveal pain would be to open a door she had sealed shut with great effort. There was something sacred about her self-control. It wasn't about pretending, it was about protection. Isadora knew that if she let herself break, it wouldn't just be Carlos who saw, it would be her, too. Every step she took across that dining room was a silent declaration. I'm still here. Even with a heart in pieces, she remained standing. The pregnancy made everything more intense. The exhaustion, the emotions, the fear. But it also awakened a strength she didn't know she had. And as the tablet remained firm in her hands, she realized that no matter how exposed she felt, there was one thing no one could take from her, her dignity. But in that emotionally charged atmosphere, someone else had started to feel something unexpected while watching her. Camila wasn't naive. From the moment they arrived, she had noticed something off about Carlos's behavior. His lingering stares toward the waitress, the sudden silence, his restless fingers fiddling with a napkin. The tension was almost visible. When the pregnant woman approached again, Camila connected the dots in a heartbeat. "Who is she?" she asked, bluntly, with the tone of someone who doesn't tolerate half-truths. The answer came in a shameful whisper. "She's my ex-wife." And just like that, Camila's world tilted. Indignation surged through her. To her, it wasn't just an ex, it was a pregnant woman, visibly shaken, still dealing with something Carlos clearly hadn't put to rest. As someone used to fashion runways and magazine covers, Camila knew all too well what it felt like to be used as a display piece. She stood up, her face burning, grabbed her purse in one swift motion, and didn't even wait for dessert. "If you can't resolve your past, there's no room for you in my present," she said, before walking away. Carlos was left sitting there, alone at the table, surrounded by luxury and emptiness. The expensive wine lost its flavor, the ambient music became a distant hum. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to do. Without Camila, without control, without masks. That night, which was supposed to be just another showcase of his success, had become an uncomfortable mirror. And as the restaurant returned to its elegant routine, Carlos sank into a reality far more painful than he was ready to admit. Sitting there alone, Carlos was flooded with memories he had tried to bury for years. The arguments, the shouting, the slamming doors, it all came back like a poorly edited film, scenes out of order but loaded with pain. He remembered the words he hurled like weapons, the coldness with which he treated Isadora at the end, as if she were disposable. Back then, he believed he was just being honest. Now, he saw that he had been cruel. The phrases that once felt powerful now echoed like knives coming back to cut him. His mind gave him no peace. Images of their wedding, the white dress, the dreams they had for the future, the whispered promises, all blurred together with the emptiness he now felt. The divorce had been a clean break for him, but for Isadora, he was beginning to understand it had been a slow, painful, and lonely process. He had never asked how she was after it all. Never wanted to know. Until now. Because seeing her pregnant, on her feet, working, strong despite everything, shed light on the truth. She moved on alone. And he, with all his luxury, had remained emotionally stuck. That realization hurt more than he expected. Carlos was no longer a reckless young man, and yet he had acted as if her feelings didn't matter. Now, with the past knocking at his door, regret began to grow silently inside him. He didn't know if there was still time to fix things, but for the first time, he asked himself, what if I had done things differently? But before he could search for an answer, something even more unexpected happened that night. Carlos stood up from the table, as if the floor were on fire. Shame, regret, and urgency tangled in a knot in his stomach. He walked toward Isadora with no plan, driven only by the desperate impulse of someone who feels time slipping through their fingers. "Give me 5 minutes. Just 5, he pleaded, his voice shaking, as if that would be enough to erase years of silence. Her eyes, however, didn't yield so easily. She stared at him with the calm of someone who had already cried enough. Isadora took a deep breath. For a second, it looked like she might agree. But then, with the same strength she used to carry her world every day, she replied, 5 minutes won't change anything. You made it clear months ago that you didn't want to talk anymore. The sadness in her eyes wasn't recent, it was old, settled, now layered with a strength he had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was healing. And that silent pain said more than any scream could. Carlos felt as though he'd been hit again, this time with no defense. He wanted to argue, to say he had changed, that he didn't realize how much he had hurt her. But none of that felt worthy anymore. It all felt too late. Isadora wasn't being cruel, just realistic. And in the silence between them, he understood. Sometimes, when you break something valuable and wait too long to fix it, it doesn't break further, it becomes something else. Still, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. Do you like the way this is going? Would you like to adjust or add anything? Carlos always believed success was a simple equation. Money in the bank, international trips, glamorous parties, and a stunning woman on his arm. 4 years, he followed that script like fulfilling a prophecy, and earned applause for it. But that night, standing before Isadora with tired eyes and a body carrying new life, he tasted for the first time the bitter flavor of what he had built. It wasn't victory. It was escape. And all the sparkle that once blinded his doubts now looked like empty decor on a stage with no plot. He remembered nights in 5-star hotels where the bed felt enormous and unbearably cold. The parties where he smiled for the cameras, only to return home with a heavy chest. All of it began to make cruel sense. He hadn't overcome anything. He had only numbed himself with luxury. Isadora, with her quiet strength and steady gaze, awakened something far more powerful than desire, truth. The truth that he had lost much more than he ever realized, and the success he flaunted couldn't buy what truly mattered. What used to be symbols of achievement, cars, watches, fancy dinners, now felt childish. Carlos felt ashamed, like someone who studied for the wrong test his whole life. Because it wasn't the absence of Isadora that hurt, it was the fact that she had continued on, moved forward, and built something real while he chased temporary applause. And in that quiet moment, he knew, something inside him needed to change. But not even he could imagine what was still to come in the days ahead. The question escaped before Carlos could even think, is that baby mine? It was more than curiosity, it was desperation dressed up as control. Isadora held his gaze, unflinching. No, she's not yours. The answer hit him like a stone in the gut. He should have felt relief, maybe even indifference. But what filled him instead was something darker, more primal, jealousy. A jealousy that burned inside him, not from possessiveness, but from absence. From not being part of something that could have been his. Carlos never imagined he'd care so much about a life that wasn't his. But there he was, facing the idea of another man having stepped into the space that was once his. He pictured someone touching Isadora's belly at night, talking to the baby, buying tiny clothes, and it devastated him. It wasn't just the child, it was the intimacy, the bond, the story being built without him. For the first time, Carlos understood what it meant to not be irreplaceable. And that truth, so harsh, made him feel smaller than ever. It was a cruel conflict. He didn't want to be a father, but he couldn't bear the idea of Isadora moving on with someone else. Was it ego, fear, regret? Probably a little of everything. Carlos found himself standing before an emotional mirror, where each reflection showed a part of him he had long hidden or denied. But before he could make sense of the storm inside, something unexpected happened, turning that night even further on its head. Isadora didn't speak with anger. She spoke with the serenity of someone who has already faced the worst. The baby's father left when he found out I was pregnant. Carlos swallowed hard. Rage rose in his face like instinct, not because he wanted Isadora back, but because he hated the thought of someone having the audacity to abandon her like that. Her, who had always been loyal, honest, supportive. How could he asked, as if hoping for logic in something so cowardly. But Isadora just sighed, tired of explaining the inexcusable. Carlos expected to find a broken woman, but what he saw was someone who had turned pain into the foundation of her strength. I'd rather my daughter grow up without a father than with one who only shows up out of duty, she said firmly. It hit Carlos straight in the heart. Because deep down, he knew. He, too, had been absent when he had the chance to be present. But she didn't say that. She didn't need to. Her silent choice said it all. She didn't want pity, least of all scraps. She wanted respect. And she was ready to face the world to give that to her daughter. As he listened, Carlos felt his own idea of manhood shatter. Everything he believed about strength, presence, and responsibility collapsed in front of a pregnant woman, standing tall, facing life with dignity. It was no longer about the other man, or even about him. It was about what Isadora was building, a conscious, strong, loving motherhood, even if solitary. And just when he thought the night's surprises were over, an unexpected gesture from Isadora opened a new door. Isadora held the tablet tightly to her chest, but her words cut like a fine blade. Even with a degree, even with years of experience, I've been rejected from every job interview since my belly started to show. Carlos listened in silence, a lump forming in his throat. He had never stopped to think how the job market could so easily turn its back on a pregnant woman. In his bubble of contracts and convenience, he had always believed merit spoke louder. But in practice, he saw how cruel and selective the world really was. She told him how she'd walk into interviews full of hope, with a flawless resume and confident posture. But the moment someone's eyes fell on her belly, the whole atmosphere would change. The classic, "We'll be in touch," always came with a polite smile and eternal silence. "It's like I became a burden instead of a professional," she said, her voice calm but marked by scars. Motherhood, something that should be celebrated, had become an invisible wall. And with every door that closed, Isadora rose again, with less energy, but more strength. Carlos was speechless. The woman he thought he knew had faced a world he had never even imagined. It wasn't just about professional rejection, it was about judgment, isolation, the suffocating sense of invisibility in a system that routinely overlooks the real struggles of women. For the first time, he understood that studying at the same universities didn't mean they had been given the same opportunities. And just when he thought he couldn't possibly admire her more, Isadora revealed something that made everything even more powerful. She spoke casually, but every word landed like a blow. "There were weeks when I ate only once a day. I missed rent, the electricity was about to be shut off. I had to choose between paying a bill or buying rice." Carlos widened his eyes. He was used to $500 dinners, but had never stopped to think about what it really meant to go hungry. And there she was, pregnant, body exhausted, feet swollen, serving fancy meals to people who would never even wonder whether the waitress had eaten that day. She wasn't playing the victim. She spoke like someone who had already accepted that in the real world, you either face it or fall apart, and she couldn't afford to fall apart. 7 months pregnant, working long hours on her feet, smiling at demanding customers while her stomach twisted from hunger. Sometimes, she'd sneak leftover food from the kitchen when no one was looking. Other times, she'd just drink water to trick her body. Her belly grew, but her paycheck barely kept a roof over her head. And yet, she refused to accept charity. She preferred little with dignity over plenty with humiliation. Carlos listened as if stepping into a parallel universe. He had never imagined that someone who once shared his life could be enduring something so raw and brutal. This wasn't just about poverty, it was about resilience, about pushing forward even when everything tells you to give up. Isadora, who had once been just an uncomfortable memory of the past, was now a reflection of what he had lost, and of how much he still had to grow as a man. And then, almost without realizing it, he did something that would change everything. Isadora said the name with a mix of tenderness and strength. "We're going to name our daughter Sophia." To Carlos, that word carried unexpected weight. Sophia, which means wisdom, wasn't just a beautiful name. It was a symbol of everything that child represented, a new generation, a fresh start built on hope. His chest tightened, not out of jealousy, but because he recognized that this little girl already meant more than he could offer in that moment. Hearing the name, Carlos imagined little Sophia growing up, learning, facing the world with courage and intelligence. He realized Isadora had already begun building a story for her, a story he wasn't part of. This was a new chapter for everyone. A cycle ending for him, and beginning for her. That child, even while still in the womb, was a living reminder that life goes on, that choices have consequences, and that the past, no matter how persistent, does not define the future. Carlos felt a quiet, almost sacred emotion rising within him. Hope. And even if he had no place in Sophia's story, he could still learn from her, and from her mother. The wisdom in that name spoke to him directly, urging him to look forward, to see what could still be built, even if it didn't resemble the life he had once imagined. What he didn't know then was that this meeting was just the beginning of a much deeper journey. After that night, one that shattered every certainty, Carlos picked up his phone with trembling hands. On the other end, Camila's voice came through, cold and controlling as always, demanding explanations he no longer felt like giving. But something inside him had shifted. For the first time in years, he hung up without looking back. No promises. No excuses. Just silence. It wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of freedom. The choice didn't involve contracts, money, or status. It was a decision made by the soul. A change of course from within. And that scared him more than any financial storm ever had. The silence that followed was heavy, but strangely peaceful. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that the path to change had no shortcuts. Maybe it was too late to fix some things. But it was the first step toward something real. That dawn, while the world outside continued its indifferent rhythm, Carlos felt, for the first time, the possibility of rebuilding his life on a new foundation. Not on empty luxury, but on the truth he had only just begun to see. The night had been a shock, a painful awakening, but it was necessary. And even though the surprises of that night weren't over, he knew something fundamental had changed. And it was only the beginning. Carlos didn't sleep at all. His mind kept replaying Isadora's tired face, the quiet pain in her eyes, and the love he thought he had buried. He realized he had never stopped loving her. He had just buried those feelings beneath shallow victories and empty distractions. The realization hit like a dense fog, clouding every thought, making rest impossible. In the stillness of the night, his heart battled guilt, and a desire he could no longer deny. He remembered the moments he took for granted. Her warm smile. The strength she showed even in hardship. The silent sacrifices she made for their shared future. These memories weren't distant echoes anymore. They were sharp reminders of what he had lost, and what he still longed for. Carlos felt the weight of regret pressing down on him, but also a spark of hope. Maybe not for redemption, but at least for understanding the depth of what they once had. As the hours passed, his emotions churned like a storm. Love, guilt, and sorrow mixed into a bittersweet realization. Success without connection is empty. He finally understood that true victory isn't measured in wealth or recognition, but in the relationships that give life meaning. And when the first light of morning crept across the sky, Carlos knew. His journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. He walked into the restaurant where Isadora worked, heart pounding, each step heavy with hesitation and hope. There she was, moving gracefully between tables, just as she had the night they met again. Without pretense, he asked for another chance, a moment to try and rebuild what they had lost. But Isadora, though surprised, kept her gaze steady and distant, as if she carried every scar they'd ever caused each other. Silent reminders that the past doesn't disappear with an apology. The air between them thickened, heavy with emotions neither dared to name. But they were there, pulsing in the tension of each look, hanging in the silence between them. Isadora couldn't just forget the pain, the betrayals, the harsh words, the moments she felt utterly alone. She held all of it, not with bitterness, but with quiet strength. Determined not to fall for empty promises again. The past knocked at her door, stubborn and loud. And even there, in the middle of her shift, it was clear. Time hadn't healed everything. Carlos could feel the weight of her distrust, but also the urgency to show he had changed. He knew words wouldn't be enough. He would have to prove it, over time, through actions. The reunion he had dreamed of turned into emotional quicksand, where every step could lead to reconciliation, or to a final goodbye. And in that moment, both of them knew. This was only the beginning of a conversation that could change everything, or nothing at all. Carlos took a deep breath. His voice was steady, but thick with emotion, as he confessed. I never stopped loving you. The words hung in the air, heavy, raw, slicing through the tension like a sudden storm. Isadora's eyes widened in disbelief, a flicker of pain and skepticism crossing her face. To her, it sounded like yet another excuse, a mask worn to cover guilt and regret under the guise of love. After everything they'd been through, her heart had built walls. The wounds were still too fresh to ignore. She looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat, struggling to find words that wouldn't betray the pain hidden behind her calm exterior. Love, she whispered, her voice slightly trembling. How does love explain all the hurt, the silence, the broken promises? Isadora's doubt wasn't born from bitterness, it came from survival. She had spent years protecting herself from the echoes of their past. She knew too well that love alone wouldn't erase the scars or rebuild what had been shattered. Carlos felt the weight of her distrust bearing down on him, but stayed grounded. He understood now that words weren't enough. Healing would take time, patience, and relentless action. Still, in that fragile moment between them, his confession was like a seed planted, uncertain, but alive. And as the silence thickened around them, neither knew where that revelation might lead. Isadora looked Carlos straight in the eye, a mix of pain and resolve etched into her expression. Without hesitation, she said what had weighed on her for years. You never really fought for what we had. To her, the marriage hadn't ended because there was no love, but because there was no effort, no care. Carlos took the blow without resistance. The memories of screaming arguments, sharp words, and emotional wounds they'd inflicted on each other rushed back with brutal clarity. It was a harsh truth, but one he couldn't deny. They hadn't split over something trivial, they had deeply hurt each other. He admitted he had often let pride and ego speak louder than love. He stopped listening. Stopped showing up when she needed him the most. Their arguments hadn't been mere disagreements, they were unhealed wounds left to rot. Carlos finally realized that it wasn't just outside circumstances or isolated mistakes, it was emotional neglect that pulled them apart. Isadora, despite her pain, wasn't looking to blame him entirely. She knew they both had a hand in the unraveling. But she needed Carlos to acknowledge his failures, so she could finally find peace. Though the past still stung, it also brought clarity. And in that tense exchange, they both started to see that the road ahead would be anything but easy. Not for forgiveness, and certainly not for forgetting. Then, Isadora lifted her chin with quiet strength and spoke. These last 2 years changed me. I'm not the same woman who accepted emotional crumbs. I know my worth now. I take care of myself, and my daughter. I fought alone, and I survived. Every scar. It's a mark of how far I've come. Carlos listened in silence, struck by the certainty in her voice. Even through her pride and resistance, he couldn't help but admire her. The woman in front of him wasn't just stronger, she was radiant. Not just outwardly but from something deeper. It was as if Isadora had been reborn from her own pain, more grounded, more whole, more herself. Captivated by this new version of her, Carlos felt love and deep regret. He began to understand that he hadn't just lost the woman she used to be. He had lost the chance to grow with her. Isadora was now shining in her own right, and that made her feel even more unreachable. She held his gaze, steady and unflinching, and said, My priority now is Sophia. Everything I do, everything I am, it's for her. I don't have room for drama, or uncertainty, or a relationship that left me bleeding. Carlos swallowed hard, holding back emotion. I get it. But I've changed, Isadora. You might not believe me yet, but this pregnancy, you woke me up. I don't want to be the man who lost you. I want to be worthy of both of you. She sighed, exhausted but resolute. It's not about what you want, Carlos. It's about what I need. And what I need right now is peace. Stability. Safety. If you want to be part of that, you'll have to prove it. not with words. With actions. Carlos lowered his head, realizing the road to redemption would not be easy. Isadora was no longer a woman waiting to be saved. She was a mother now, fierce, focused, unshakable. Her daughter was her compass, and nothing would make her lose her direction again. She crossed her arms, clearly shaken but standing her ground. You were out having dinner with another woman the other night, Carlos. And now you show up talking about eternal love. He shook his head, trying to explain. I ended things with Camila. That night, it changed everything. I never forgot you, Isadora. Never. She let out a bitter laugh, eyes brimming with tears. What you're feeling right now, that has a name. Guilt. Confusion. Maybe loneliness. And for that, there's therapy, Carlos. That's not a reason to run back to the woman you broke. The silence that followed was sharp. Carlos finally understood. Winning Isadora back would take more than sweet words and late regrets. She wasn't a broken woman waiting on his return. She was someone who had learned to protect herself. Then, in a softer tone, but filled with sincerity, he met her eyes and said, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to take me back today. All I want is a chance. A chance to show you that I've changed. That I can be different. Isadora looked away, visibly shaken. Her heart pounded with memories of what they had and what they lost. Part of her wanted to believe again. The other part wanted to run. You don't get it, Carlos. There's a life growing inside me now. I can't afford to be wrong again. I have to protect my daughter, she said, her voice firm but trembling. And in that moment, torn between lingering love and fear of repeating the past, Isadora stayed silent. Carlos understood. The door wasn't open. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't fully closed either. As Isadora tried to gather herself, the restaurant manager approached with suspicion. Carlos quickly stepped in. I just wanted to say, her service was excellent. Professional. Thoughtful. It's rare to find someone like her. The manager, a stern man, nodded and walked off. Isadora stared at Carlos, caught off guard. It was a small gesture, but unexpected. Still, the memory of how he'd nearly cost her that same job, in a jealous outburst just days before, lingered in her mind. She crossed her arms again, balancing momentary gratitude with justified caution. Thanks. But I don't forget, Carlos. A pretty compliment doesn't erase everything. In the middle of their conversation, something inside Isadora finally broke open. Her voice heavy with pain, she let the words pour out. You've always lived like the world revolves around you. You ignored my pain, my needs, my warnings. Every time I cried for help, you looked the other way. Carlos stood in silence. Each word she spoke was a mirror reflecting the parts of himself he had long refused to see. And for the first time, he truly looked. And it hit. Carlos takes a deep breath and, with sincerity, admits that he failed. He confesses he was selfish, that he acted without thinking about the consequences, that he hurt the person he loved most. But he also says he doesn't want to be that man anymore. He's trying to change, even if it's late, because he's tired of destroying everything around him. He wants to rebuild, even if it takes time. Isadora watches him in silence, torn between pain and doubt. Has he really changed? Or is this just another pretty promise in a sea of past disappointments? She knows forgiveness doesn't come easily, especially with a child on the way. And yet, something in his eyes makes her heart hesitate, for the first time in a long while. Carlos remains in the corner of the restaurant, watching Isadora amid the chaos. She's exhausted, her feet swollen, her face weary, but she keeps going, serving each customer with quiet dignity. He sees her struggling to carry a tray, refusing help, determined not to rely on anyone. That moment pierces him. For the first time, he truly sees the strength she had to build on her own. His regret isn't just about a broken marriage, but about everything he failed to do while there was still time. Carlos realizes he never protected her the way he should have, never supported her as she deserved. He always thought loving her was enough, but love without action is just an empty speech. Now he sees how she fought alone, while he ran away from problems. And it breaks him inside. With teary eyes, Carlos wonders when he stopped seeing the incredible woman by his side. He begins to understand that what he lost wasn't just a marriage, it was the chance to grow alongside her. To be a true partner. The pain of regret is silent, but it cuts deep. And in that moment, he knows nothing will ever be the same. Not for her, not for him. Carlos decides that this time, he won't insist with promises. Instead, he starts showing up quietly at the restaurant every day, at the same time. He orders a coffee, sits in silence, and observes. He doesn't ask for conversation. He doesn't force encounters. He's just there, present, consistent, without any masks. Isadora notices. At first, she finds his presence strange, assumes it's just another emotional tactic to get closer. But little by little, she senses something different. He doesn't interrupt her, doesn't ask for explanations, doesn't invade her space. He simply watches, his gaze calm, almost remorseful, like someone who knows they lost something valuable and refuses to make the same mistakes again. She feels the shift, even in its silence. Carlos understands that winning back Isadora will take more than sweet words or empty vows. She needs to see, not hear. So he stays. Day after day, without pressure, without intrusion, without manipulation. He wants to show that he's willing to change, even if she never takes him back. Because, deep down, to love someone also means respecting their time. Then Camila storms into the restaurant like a hurricane. Her eyes burn with anger after being ignored for days. She demands explanations, yells, exposes her pain for everyone to hear. But Carlos is different now, calm, steady, direct. He asks her to sit, because there's something he can no longer postpone. He takes a breath and speaks clearly. He tells her what they had was never love, just a quiet arrangement of convenience and appearances. He admits he tried to convince himself it could work, but he was only fooling himself, and her too. There was no physical betrayal, but there was emotional dishonesty. And he refuses to live like that anymore. Camila feels humiliated, but deep down, she knows he's right. For the first time, Carlos doesn't try to soften the blow or sugarcoat the truth. He simply says goodbye, with respect, but without hesitation. She walks away hurt, but free. And he, alone at the table, faces the weight of his choices with the dignity of someone who's finally beginning to change. In an effort to show that he's serious about changing, Carlos offers Isadora financial support along with a job at his company. For him, it's a tangible way to make up for the past and secure a better future for her and their daughter. He believes that through this, he can prove his regret is real, not just another hollow apology. Isadora responds with a mix of indignation and sorrow. To her, the offer feels like charity, a patronizing gesture that disregards her independence and everything she's fought for. She knows Carlos isn't doing it out of kindness, but to soothe the guilt he now carries. Saying no is her way of keeping her pride intact, of showing she won't accept favors driven by remorse. Tension builds between them, and the silence that follows says more than any words could. Isadora is determined to carve out her own path, far from any help that feels like pity. Carlos realizes that what she needs goes far beyond money or a job. She needs respect, time, and above all, real evidence that he has changed. Looking him in the eyes, Isadora says firmly that she won't accept anything that makes her look weak or dependent. She fought every single day to rebuild her life on her own, carrying the weight of pregnancy and hard work alone. Giving up her autonomy now would be like erasing everything she's achieved. To her, accepting help would mean giving up what little dignity she still has. She recalls all the time she had to prove herself, face judgmental stares, and resist the temptation to give up. The strength that carries her now is the result of silent battles no one saw. Isadora knows that relying on Carlos would be a step backward, a risk she's not willing to take, even if the cost is keeping her distance. Her independence is her greatest triumph. Carlos listens, feeling the weight of her decision, and realizes that rebuilding won't be easy. More than financial support, she wants the freedom to own her own life. He understands that, if he wants to earn back even a fragment of her trust, he'll need to prove, day after day, that he's learned to respect her strength, not undermine it. Trying to show maturity, Carlos makes her another offer, to work with him again, but this time with a fair salary and decent conditions. He wants to separate the past from the present, believing that, in a professional setting, maybe they could build something different, without the pain of the marriage. To him, it's a chance to start over, even if only a little, on new ground. Isadora reacts with disbelief, almost laughing at the idea. She remembers how chaotic their relationship was, full of conflict that seemed impossible to resolve. If they couldn't get along while married, how could they possibly become co-workers without reopening old wounds? To her, the idea is absurd, and disrespectful to everything they went through. Still, she doesn't slam the door shut completely. She makes it clear, accepting the offer would require much more than promises or formal terms. Carlos understands then that offering a job isn't enough. He'll need to earn her trust back, inside and outside the workplace. The offer is just the beginning of a journey that promises to be long and full of challenges. Isadora looks at Carlos with tired eyes and tells him, firmly, that he needs to stop showing up in her life. She's trying to find herself again, to accept that she will be a single mother, and to build a new life on her own. His constant presence only confuses her feelings and disrupts this delicate, necessary process. For her, distance is essential to move forward. There is pain in her voice, but no anger, just exhaustion. She wants peace, stability, and the freedom to heal without interference. Even if there are still complicated feelings, she knows she needs space to grow stronger and protect herself, and the daughter on the way. Carlos realizes that love cannot be invasive. He feels the frustration and the sting of her "leave me alone," a phrase that cuts like a blade. It's a sobering moment that forces him to confront the extent of his own mistakes, how deeply he invaded her life without even noticing. Now the choice is his, to respect her request and wait in silence, or risk losing everything for good. Isadora exhales slowly, her eyes filled with restrained emotion, and with difficulty, admits she still feels something for Carlos. But that feeling is not the same as trust, nor is it an invitation to immediate forgiveness. It's an old wound that still throbs quietly, hidden behind anger and pride. She knows love can coexist with pain, and that duality confuses her deeply. She explains that emotions aren't like switches you flip off overnight. It takes time, respect, and above all, actions to rebuild what was destroyed. Words alone cannot heal the scars etched into the soul. For Isadora, what she feels is still a tangled knot, a complex mix that's not easily undone. Carlos listens in silence, feeling the weight of her words. He realizes it's not enough to admit he was wrong. He must prove, through real and consistent actions, that he's willing to rebuild the broken trust. The road ahead will be long and difficult, but in that moment, he understands that true love also means patience and respect. With a shaky voice, Carlos begs Isadora for one last chance, even knowing there's a child involved now. He isn't looking for instant forgiveness, he just wants to prove he can be different. He wants to be present, not just as a father, but as someone who genuinely loves and protects. His plea is humble, full of hope, and fear of what he stands to lose. Isadora, torn between wanting to believe and the fear of getting hurt again, hesitates. She knows it won't be easy to trust so soon, and the past left deep marks. But despite the doubts, she listens to his sincere request, even though she knows opening that door will require more than words. It will demand concrete actions and consistent respect. She sets clear boundaries, insisting that any attempt to reconnect must prioritize the well-being of their daughter and honor the limits she, as a mother, imposes. Isadora wants to avoid unnecessary pain, for herself, and for the child still growing inside her. That moment becomes a fine line between fear and hope, a chance that could change everything, or rebuild the walls of the past. Carlos was next to Isadora when he felt the baby kick for the first time, and the impact of that moment hit him deeply. That small, yet undeniable movement seemed to express everything that words couldn't. It was as if life had taken on a new shape right then, uniting the past and the future in a single heartbeat of hope. Tears welled up in his eyes, silent and sincere. Isadora, initially surprised by his emotion, felt her heart soften just a little. That baby inside her was a bridge between what had been and what could still be. For the first time in a long while, she saw not just the man who had hurt her, but someone willing to be present, to carry the weight and joy of that new life. A glimpse of possibility bloomed within her. Despite the wounds and the uncertainty, that moment cracked open part of the wall Isadora had built around herself. It wasn't a guarantee, not yet, but it was a beginning. A small sign that maybe there could be an us again, not because of the past, but for what might still lie ahead. A moment that could change everything, if they let it. Isadora looks Carlos in the eyes, firm and unwavering, and says she's willing to try, but makes it clear that any mistake will be the final end. She's not here for games or empty promises. The past taught her words are not enough. This is his last chance, and hers too, for a real, illusion-free new beginning. Carlos feels the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. He promises, with full sincerity, that this time, he will prove his love through actions, not just sweet talk. He's determined to be the man both Isadora and their daughter deserve. No excuses, no escapes. To him, it's a daily battle worth fighting. They both know the road ahead will be full of challenges. Trust takes time to return. But there's a spark of hope lit by this commitment, a promise of love with a new meaning, a firm vow to turn feeling into something real, built step by step, with courage and respect. Carlos surprises everyone when he cancels important social events to focus on Isadora. He realizes that winning her trust back won't happen through lavish gestures or parties, but with real presence and daily attention. He starts visiting her apartment often, offering companionship and care, with no pressure or expectations. Each gesture begins to speak louder than words. He even starts cooking for her, something completely new to him. He learns simple recipes, prepares homemade meals with care, bringing warmth and a personal touch that Isadora notices and appreciates. These small moments become powerful symbols of a sincere commitment, showing he wants to be part of her life, and the life of the child they're expecting. Isadora watches this transformation cautiously, still guarded, but unable to ignore how these efforts touch her heart. His change is visible, different from anything she saw before. She knows change is never easy, but each day Carlos chooses to be present feels like a step toward a new possibility, a hope that grows quietly. Carlos establishes a gentle routine of constant care, arriving with home-cooked meals made with affection. He never pressures Isadora. He respects her silence, her need for space. This steady, respectful presence slowly starts transforming the atmosphere between them, bringing a sense of comfort that once seemed unreachable. Day by day, Isadora feels her tension begin to ease, and her trust slowly begins to grow. When Carlos naturally mentions the baby's name, Sophia, she realizes he already sees her as part of a family in the making. It's a powerful sign that touches her deeply, showing he's not just holding on to the past, he's fully embracing the future. This daily care becomes the greatest proof of love Carlos can give. It's not about grand words, but simple, honest gestures that quietly make room for hope. Isadora begins to believe that maybe, just maybe, this man truly wants to be different. For her, for their daughter, and for what they could still become together. When Isadora doesn't show up for work one day, Carlos feels a tightness in his chest and rushes to her apartment, more worried than ever before. When he arrives, he finds out she had some light contractions but couldn't see a doctor because she didn't have money for the consultation. The harsh reality she lives hits him hard, revealing the gap between their lives. Gently, Carlos offers to go with her, not as a savior, but as someone who truly cares. He knows now it's not about taking control or fixing everything. It's about being there, offering support and safety. That simple gesture marks a new attitude, a true and respectful partnership. Isadora, surprised by his genuine concern, accepts the help but keeps her posture strong and independent. She knows his help is a step, not a surrender. And Carlos understands that this is another chance to prove he's willing to walk beside her, even through the hard moments, without crossing her boundaries. Carlos takes responsibility and pays for her doctor's visit and tests, something she neither expected nor wanted to ask for. At the clinic, he gently holds her hand while the ultrasound shows the baby is healthy, a silent relief that moves them both deeply. It's an intimate moment that brings them closer, without a single word. The doctor recommends rest and special care, but Isadora insists on continuing to work. She needs the income to support herself. She refuses to rely on anyone, not even him. Her strength and resilience leave Carlos in awe, making him realize how much she carries alone, fighting a battle he had never truly seen before. For Carlos, that day becomes a turning point. He stops seeing Isadora as just his ex-wife, and begins to truly see her, the strong, fierce mother and woman she is. He understands that winning back her trust means honoring that strength, and being willing to be a true support, not just a shadow from the past. When they arrive home, there's still a sense of awkwardness and caution in the air, but also an undeniable truth. Here they are, together, forming a family. Not a perfect one, nor an idealized one, but a real one. It's the beginning of a new life, built on respect, love, and the will to overcome the past. Carlos reveals himself as a devoted father, willing to face sleepless nights and the small crises that only a baby brings. He wakes up in the middle of the night to feed Sophia, plays with her on the living room floor, and sings those silly songs that make the baby laugh. These simple moments show a deep transformation, one that goes far beyond the surface. Isadora watches all this with a mix of surprise and tenderness, realizing that the love she once felt for Carlos never fully disappeared. But now, she loves a different man, someone who has learned to value what truly matters. He is the man who chose to be present, not the one lost to vanity and pride. This rebirth of love isn't immediate or perfect, but it is real and tangible. They begin to build a relationship based on the present and future, not the painful past. Carlos's fatherhood becomes the bridge that unites them, creating bonds that could last forever. One peaceful night, Isadora finally lets out an "I love you" from the depths of her heart, loaded with the whole story they've lived through. It's a different kind of declaration, born from time, healing, and deep changes in both of them. She doesn't speak of an idealized love, but a mature and true feeling that respects their shared past. Carlos, moved, doesn't hesitate and takes advantage of the moment to make a special request. In the middle of the living room, with Sophia sleeping peacefully in her crib, he kneels and asks if she wants to be his wife again. It's a simple question, yet full of meaning, a proposal to rewrite their future together. Isadora answers with a yes that is not impulsive but thoughtful, a yes that acknowledges the scars but also the strength of renewal. That yes is a promise that, despite the difficulties, they choose to walk side by side. A new chapter begins, with firm roots and hope in their hearts. 6 months later, Carlos and Isadora decide to celebrate their love in a simple and sincere way, surrounded only by close family and a few dear friends. No big parties or extravagance, just a genuine moment of union and renewal. The simplicity of the event reflects what truly matters to them, the essence of love and family. During the ceremony, their eyes meet with emotion, full of stories and struggles that brought them to that moment. When they finally kiss, something unexpected and charming happens. Sophia claps joyfully, as if giving her own blessing to this new beginning. It's a magical moment that officially seals a new phase in their lives. This wedding represents more than exchanged vows. It's the celebration of a journey of growth, forgiveness, and true love. They learn that it's not luxury or appearances that define a relationship, but the depth of commitment and the willingness to face whatever comes with open hearts. 2 years after that fresh start, Carlos is no longer the empty man he once was. Now, he proudly treasures every drawing Sophia makes, true treasures that symbolize his growing bond with their daughter. These small daily reminders show how much he has learned to value simple, genuine love. When Isadora shares that she's pregnant again, Carlos's reaction is unexpected, pure joy and emotion. The news carries the promise of an even fuller future, a family growing amidst dreams and hope. Fear and insecurity have been replaced by a firm confidence in the new journey they face together. This concrete happiness is the result of a chance given, a true commitment, and the courage to change. They know life won't always be easy, but now they have the strength and love needed to face any challenge, together as a united and strengthened family. With eyes shining bright, Sophia listens as her parents tell her she'll have a little brother. She instantly gets excited, full of enthusiasm, saying she'll teach the baby to play and take care of him like a big sister. This pure, innocent reaction brings a special warmth to the room, showing the hope that this child represents. The moment reveals much more than simple news. It symbolizes the renewed cycle of love and unity this family is about to live. It's a new chapter where the painful past makes room for the building of strong, sincere bonds, now expanding with the arrival of new life. This new beginning, rooted in forgiveness, maturity, and truly renewed love, shows that even the hardest stories can find a path to light. The family, once fragile, now walks united, ready to face challenges and celebrate the joys yet to come. In the quiet of the night, Isadora and Carlos sit on the porch, wrapped in a gentle breeze and comforting silence. Between slow words and deep glances, they start sharing reflections on the turbulent past and the present that, despite scars, binds them in an unprecedented way. It's a moment of real, sincere connection. They both recognize that the pain of separation was paradoxically fertile ground for individual growth and the maturing of their relationship. Every difficult choice, every mistake made, served to prepare them for a reconciliation that isn't just a return, but a solid, conscious, and lasting rebuilding. They see this new phase with respect and hope. This reunion isn't the result of chance, but the outcome of a journey marked by suffering, learning, and above all, a true choice. They understand that the love they now share is different, deeper, because it was born from hardships and the courage to stay together, not out of obligation but genuine will. Carlos recalls, with a hint of shame, the man he used to be, an arrogant businessman focused only on success and blindly neglectful of his family. He remembers the selfish behaviors that slowly pushed away those he loved most, creating a void money could never fill. But everything changed the moment he saw Isadora pregnant, working as a waitress, facing the world with quiet dignity and strength. It was there, in that simple and harsh scene, that the old man died. The loving father was born, the present husband, someone willing to give up pride to embrace what truly matters. Now, Carlos is a transformed man who finally understands the true meaning of purpose and love. He knows success isn't in possessions, but in dedication, respect, and presence for the people we love. This deep change guides him toward a different future, one full of meaning and hope. Carlos feels profound gratitude for Isadora, not only for giving him a new chance but for allowing him to become a better man. He recognizes that without that reunion, he would never have discovered the strength that love and humility can awaken inside. This gratitude is sincere and shapes every one of his actions. Isadora, in turn, reciprocates this feeling with open and honest recognition. She sees that Carlos's changes aren't empty words but real actions that reflect his daily effort. This exchange of gratitude builds a solid bridge, healing old wounds and strengthening their bond. It's a moment of deep reconciliation where two souls consciously choose to begin again together. They understand life offers second chances to those brave enough to change, and that this new beginning is the true meaning of love, the kind that heals, strengthens, and frees. Carlos watches Sofia sleeping peacefully, a picture of serenity that touches his heart deeply and transforms him. At that moment, he feels he has finally understood his role, not as a successful businessman, but as the guardian of these two precious lives. It's an awakening that goes beyond material achievements. His purpose, once cloudy and selfish, is now clear: to care for Isadora and Sofia, to protect them and love them unconditionally. This mission becomes the driving force pushing him to be better each day, to dedicate himself with courage and humility. The love that once seemed distant now becomes the essence behind every action he takes. From that moment on, love becomes his greatest treasure, something that can't be measured in money or possessions, but in the depth of care and true devotion. Carlos realizes that within the simplicity of a life lived with purpose lies true wealth, the kind that transforms and lasts forever. Carlos wakes up to Sofia jumping on the bed, her smile lighting up the room and filling his heart with joy. He feels a simple yet profound happiness, unlike any material success he has ever achieved. It is the fulfillment of a man who has found his real treasure. He understands clearly and decisively that true fortune isn't in possessions or money, but in the love he has built day by day with Isadora and Sofia. This intangible wealth is the foundation that supports his life and gives meaning to everything he does. It's a legacy no crisis can ever destroy. In that modest home, filled with affection and companionship, Carlos feels like the richest man in the world. Every laugh, every hug, every gesture of care is a priceless treasure. He's learned that what truly matters is human connection and genuine presence, things money could never buy.